Well, welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Satori Shakoor, aka Jeanette Magruder from back in the day. It's my pleasure and it's an honor to be your host this evening for We Want the Funk. I'm also the host of Detroit Performs on Detroit PBS. Thank you. You watch. Yay, yay, yay. I'm also the founder and the producing artistic director for the Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers. Thank you. So first, we just want to thank the Charles Wright Museum of African American History for being our partners in this wonderful, exciting evening and opening its doors to this beautifully renovated theater. Stanley Nelson, a preeminent filmmaker in America. He has turned his attention to the history, the legendary influence, and the greatness of funk. And in this documentary, We Want the Funk, George Clinton is prominently featured. George Clinton was a pioneer, he's still with us. Just got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He is one of the pioneers and proponents of funk music. Since the early 1960s until this day, funk endures. Funk endures. So Stanley Nelson and the film's co-director, Nicole London, have created a masterpiece here. And I just think it's real important to document this music. It's not just the music, it's the time, it's the culture, it's what was going on politically and everything else. So I think that's very important. And later on, where's Jamon? Later I'm gonna introduce Jamon and have him say a few words. So joining me on stage in this great panel discussion is Cheryl James.
Hello, how's everybody?
She is a longtime road and entertainment manager for George Clinton, Temptations, you name it, she was out there. We have Kevin Saunderson down here.
Hey, hey.
A musical pioneer who, along with two friends of his, Belleville, Michigan, invented techno music. And David Lee Spradley, a legendary keyboardist who co-wrote the monster hit, Atomic Dog. So let me start with you, Cheryl. So tell us a little bit about your experience on the road with George when you met George.
This is family friendly, so I have to keep it presentable. I was on the road to Temptations for a moment. Dennis Edwards hired me. I wanted to work in the business end of music. There were no women doing that. I love a challenge. Back then in the 60s, late 60s, that was a hell of a challenge. I didn't stay on the road very long for Temptations. Came off the road. A friend of mine was into, well, a particular kind of business. She asked me would I go to New York with her to conduct this business and bring things back home. So I wasn't doing anything at the moment, and I was like, oh, that sounds like an adventure. So we go to New York. Our connection in New York happened to be Eddie Hazel. Eddie Hazel walks up to the car, he's smiling, he's very nice, very, very, very talented young man. He says, come on in. I didn't even realize I was sitting outside the Apollo Theater. They were working, getting ready to do a gig that night. I go in the Apollo, that's when I met the crew. George is laying down in the dressing room somewhere, met all the fellas. Really nice, really nice, really nice. So George knew, after meeting me, having conversation with me, he knew that I had been on the road already working with the Temptations, working with Dennis. I'll put it like that. I have to keep it singular. Dennis. He hired me as his driver and gopher. I didn't care how I got in the business. I just wanted my foot in the door. So that was my foot in the door. So eventually they moved to Detroit. As he stated, they had Motown on the mind. They came to Detroit. They were living in apartments in various sundry other places. I let a lot of them stay with me. I happened to be doing okay at the time. I had a big house, and so a lot of them spent a lot of time with me. As things progressed, George decided he wanted to add women. I'm like, oh, that's going to be interesting. One day I go to the studio, because I used to hang out in the studio quite a bit, learning, watching, paying attention to the management people. At that point in time, wasn't singing. He even let me sing background. George is cool like that. If you could do it, go ahead and do it. So at any rate, watching, listening, paying attention, one day I come to the studio and George says, hey, he says, I'm getting ready to add a couple of female groups to this whole organization. He said, how would you like to manage them, be their road manager? I'm like, if you're serious, of course I'll do it. I didn't have a clue what to do on the road, but I knew I could learn because I'm smart. So George hires me, gets the groups together, the Brides of right now, and we've got some in the house, and Parlette. We've got Parlette in the house. Yes. Shirley Hayden is here. Sheila somewhere. She went out the door. Sheila was here. Okay, the experience on the road was something that I never, ever imagined. It has to be the wildest ride I've ever been on in my life. It was so different. And being a woman, it was so hard. Being on the road with a lot of musicians that were young and partying, women everywhere. Our bus, the Mothership, every night we took off from a venue heading out of town, going somewhere. I had to walk the Mothership, pull curtains back on the bunks, and tell the ladies that were in there, get off the bus. How old are you? Does your mother know that you on the bus laying in his bunk right now? I have put women off the bus in other cities because they hid them so well when we took off. One story I've never told, and I don't have much time. I left Satori at a truck stop once by mistake. That's the only mistake I ever made on the road that I've ever felt bad about. The next thing I know, Mothership's going down the road. The truckers back in the day, CBs, you hear the truckers talking back and forth. Breaker, breaker, I got this black lady on my truck with me, and she climbed in an 18-wheeler with a white man she'd never seen before in her life to catch up with the Mothership.
We were in Little Rock, Arkansas. You weren't going to leave me there. I knocked on his window. He woke up. I said, my bus left. He said, don't you worry, little girl. We going to get you to your bus. And he's CB.
I'm with Joe at the front of the bus. I'm sitting down. I'm like, oh, God. Satori's now on the bus. We know that Satori's on the other bus. I hear another trucker say, oh, we just passed a whole buckload of rug heads. That must be them. Y'all ain't far away. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. So we knew that Satori was coming down the road behind us, close by. And we pulled up. I have been so regretful of that all my life. I've never done anything like that. So forgive me for leaving you out there at truck stop.
Kevin Saunderson.
I can't go on, right, yeah.
I mean, we could be up here all night.
Yes.
Kevin Saunderson, you are an innovator of techno music. I mean, Detroit is just an innovative incubator of raw talent that turns into a cultural global phenomenon. So tell us how funk influenced you.
Well, I went to school with Juan Atkins and Derek May, and the reason I started listening to, I guess, more funk music is because one day Derek he stayed with me like for a semester, the second semester before he moved back to Detroit. We living in Belleville, and he was like, I was like, it's time to go to sleep, man. We got to get up tomorrow. He was like, no, it's time for the Midnight Funk Association. I had no idea what he was talking about. So, Mojo, that's how I found out about this music. I listened to Mojo. So, it inspired me, Parliament, all the funk music. My brother was a road manager for like brass construction, BT Express. So music was always around me, and the funk was always around me. And that was kind of my beginning. And as I elevated into creating music later down, a few years later now, because I was in junior high and then high school when I first, I guess, were high school. So anyway, later on, as I started creating music, it seemed like it was just part of my DNA. You know, that's how I perceived creating the music and making music. Still making it funky, but making people be able to dance to it. That was always important. Like when I did drums, I always put a lot of swing on my drums. It gave it a different kind of groove. That was one of my staples. So that's really how I got influenced by the funk.
All right. So David, we called David back in the day Chong. I don't know, was that racist? I don't know.
No, Bootsy gave me that name.
Bootsy gave, okay. So I'll blame it on Bootsy. But David Lee Spradley, can you just share with us what your experience was co-writing Atomic Dog, and did you foresee it being this sustaining? And thank you very much for those royalty checks.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. Thank George, and may you rest in peace, Gary Scheider. The three of us are credited with that song, but there's a lot of love in that song from the whole group. Everybody that sang, worked on that song, put their whole heart into it, and you could feel it. And that's the beauty of funk, you know? Everybody can participate and be themselves and just relish in the freedom of it. And for me, working with George and all the Funketeers opened doors for me in music and joy, and rhythm. It's an incredible experience. I don't know what else to say about it.
Okay, that's good.
I was lucky to work with such great
Well, what was
people.
the song about? I thought it was a celebration of manhood.
It is. Actually,
Okay.
that's why it's so popular, I think,
Okay.
because the lyrics that George came up with are universal to all males, for sure. And that's almost half of the people.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many men out there on the road. 3 girls, a road manager, female. Because we wasn't just the thousands of people in the men in P-Funk. It was Kool in the Gang, the Gap Band, Kool in the Gang. Everybody that was opening up for George was out there on the road. So it was so many men and so much to choose from. Half of them were married, so that took half of them off the plate. But I had a strict rule: do not date any musicians. You know, that was just too risky business. But mostly what I remember having come in as a Bride of Funkenstein, where we were always in the studio. I remember Sly Stone coming to the group, Felipe Wynn, Maceo Parker, Jessica Cleaves. Now, of all the stars that I met as we traveled the world, Jessica Cleaves was like, bow down. I mean, because I used to cover her songs. I mean, they used to call me Unfunky Magruder. Because I didn't come from a gospel background or church. I came from art song, you know, classical music. So, but then Bernie Boyle did too, so I felt kind of at home. But what I remember about George is the things that he would say, the philosophies that he would drop. We were at Super Disc recording studios, 9 Mile, recording something. And there was this record that I hated. It came out of Europe. It was very mechanical. Dun, 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 and it would come on, it was in heavy rotation because it was popular. We were on break in the green room, and I remember going, I hate that song. And George comes through. If you hate it that much, you might as well love it. And he just kept going. It took me a few years to unpack that. It really did. I thought about that for years. What does he mean? And then I got that, okay, if I'm going to put that much energy in hating something, then I could just relax and love it. Now, I never really came to love that song, but I didn't have that visceral reaction anymore. It was just the things that George would drop, like in the studio, we'd be on the mic, and there was no such thing as a mistake. The mistakes were creative opportunities. So if you like a lot of the little iconic phrases that you hear on the record that we repeat, that wasn't really supposed to be there. Somebody said that. And then it became a competition of mistakes. Okay, George would say, sing this, ding, 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 and somebody would go, ding, ding. Oh, yeah, I like that. Keep that. So he encouraged creativity. There was no shame. There's Sheila Horn up there, one of the Brides of Funkenstein.
Hey, Sheila.
Everybody Texas from a cowboy. If you hear that raspy rock voice that's killing it, that's Sheila. Shirley, would you stand up and give a wave? Parlette. We were the women's. And the audience was more entertaining. I mean, they were looking at us grooving, but I was looking at them going, wow, look at these people. I remember a woman was there, a big woman. She was right in the front row. She was a groover. She had her eyes closed, and there was like a couple men on either side of her. And I watched them both lift her breasts up out of her top and just hold them up to the sky. And she didn't know it was all, she just kept grooving right there. And I was just singing and staring at this. I mean, when you watch the film, you heard freedom. You heard freedom because there was so much oppression and repression at the time. Like now, like that movie is relevant now. And we're getting back to that, can we say this? Can we say that? This is PBS. Can we really talk about the drugs? Okay. And so to have a music that was infectious, that was you recognize with your DNA, and that it could just release you, and you could just let your body and your mind go wherever it wanted to go. It was spiritual. It was a release, and it was church. At least it was church for me. So Cheryl, we were all scared of Cheryl. I'm gonna tell you, I was terrified. If Cheryl said, "Get up! It's 5 o'clock in the morning. Get up and get on the bus." Whatever I was doing, I was like, my suitcase, clothes falling off my suitcase. I'm getting on the bus. She's still scary. Where did you get that power from?
I guess my family, the way I grew up. I was just expected to be about it. Yeah. So I was always about it. Everybody, well, not everybody came from a small family, but if I looked around, it was like, you're doing their thing. So I knew I had to do mine. And because I didn't do what they wanted me to do, I really had to perform. So that put me in another space. Yeah.
Cool. We loved you, but was scared as shit. Okay.
One quick plug. Mark your calendars. October 1. There is a book hitting bookstores all over America. Notices are already going out. The book is titled Mothership Connected, and it's about the women of P-Funk. It's going to be a hell of a book. It is a hell of a book. Some of the gentlemen that you witnessed narrating the documentary you just watched, they have a say-so in the book. They're commenting on things that P-Funk did and the women's accomplishments with P-Funk. So October 1, Mothership Connected will hit your bookstores.
So David, do you have a favorite story from that time? What? Do you have a favorite story from the time you were?
Oh, man.
Probably interesting story for everyone would be, how did I get in P-Funk? You got to admit, I was so fortunate that I got in P-Funk that it changed my life for the better. And I was able to experience some joy in life that could never come any other way than playing in front of thousands of people who never would let you get off the stage. You would be finished with the show, and they would say no, and you're like, you're so exhausted from grooving for 4.5 hours, but you don't care, and you do it anyway. So that's one of the memories. But meeting George, I actually played on a Funkadelic, it was a Parliament record called Big Bang Theory before I even met George. And Big Bang Theory was a fun song. And I got a call from the studio on 9 Mile and said, hey, George's keyboard player missed his flight and he got to get this record finished. Can you come over and put some keyboards on it? And I said, sure. I said, is it paying? And he said, yeah, it's all legit. This is a record company stuff. I said, okay, cool. So I go and I meet the producer. Now, I've been doing other sessions for Greg Riley, the engineer that followed me, but more country rock, just general white music. So, oh, but when I met the producer, he was dressed like in full funk Parliament regalia, looking like a medieval knight, stuff, and I'm wearing, very fancy robe, glitter, and I'm like, what up? He says, well, you play keyboard, right? I said, yeah. He says, well, I need some keyboard parts on this song. I said, well, let me hear it. As soon as he played that music, I knew I was home. I knew I was.
So Kevin, Belleville, I have a friend that lives in Belleville. It's a little distant from Detroit, but music reaches, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think she's talking. Yeah.
But you're right, David, it does.
No, I just wanted to tell you that after I recorded those parts on Big Bang Theory, I got a call the next morning from a person who I'd never heard his voice before, and I couldn't really quite understand him, but I eventually figured out it was George Clinton. And he says, I need to meet you. And I'm going, what? He said,
You're a hell of a keyboard man. I mean,
he says, did you play on that song? I said, yes. He said, I need to meet you now. And so I said, where? He said, I got a new apartment in Southfield. I need you to come over there. So I went over to the apartment in Southfield, knocked on the door. He opens the door, and there's this guy with all crazy hair and stuff, and he's wearing a sheet. There's no furniture in the apartment. There's nothing. It's just the empty apartment, and George's there smoking weed. They go, hey, you want some? I said, am I in the right place? He says, man, I'm George Clinton, man. And so we sat down in that empty apartment, and we talked for about 2 hours. And I decided, he said, you can come on board, man. It's the mothership. I said, man, I need a home so bad. And I found my identity in P-Funk. Is that crazy?
That's great. So, Kevin, I wanted to ask you more about the influences of funk in techno. And it also, you seem to be somewhat like George for techno, an innovator, a poet in that genre. So can you just tell us more about your collaboration with that style of music?
Well, I think for me, like with techno, like with Juan and Derek and the people that was around at that time, Eddie Folks, and music that I was listening to at the time, I'm originally from New York, but I moved to to Inkster, and then from Inkster I went to Belfast. So I was influenced a little bit by New York and vocals, and then my mother grew up listening to Motown and playing it in the car and stuff. But when I heard like Parliament Funkadelic, tracks like that, I was around my schoolmates and we were just listening to the albums and listening to Mojo play it. As I started to create music, what really captured me is not just the funk and the groove, but the sound of the keyboards, the synth. That's what locked my ear on. And then Kraftwerk on the other end from Europe. So when, people might hear Derek May say, like, it's like if George Clinton and Kraftwerk got stuck in an elevator together for hours, that's how this music influenced us to bring out the best of both worlds. Funk, futurists, electronics, all that technology, using it. And one man could do it. I didn't grow up with music theory or around or in a band at all. I didn't know how to play music. So I started creating drums. And I started doing that with drum machines. And I just kept elevating. And I was going back to my inspirations, records that I like, and find my own path and find my own way. So I was able to collaborate those inspirations there, along with some disco. And I wanted people to dance. I wanted 4 on the floor, and I wanted to do something different. I wasn't trying to do hip-hop. I wasn't really trying to do love songs, stuff like that. I wanted to do something just uplifting and inspiring to bring people together.
Very well done, sure. Very well done.
So David was talking about how George's apartment looked. Well, he had a farm up here in Michigan, and I was out at the farm, and George really did not have furniture, just big fat stuffed animals. And what I noticed are the little things, like he had all the Funkadelic, Parliament, all of the albums that he produced. That was it, except one album, and that was Stevie Wonder. And I was like, he must really love Stevie Wonder for that to be the only album that wasn't something that he produced. So it was like little things about George that they weren't really little, they were really profound, but they were things, think pieces, things that made you think and grow beyond the music. So I loved my experience. It was like going to come from a cover band in Detroit to stages of 20,000 people, 10,000 people, 80,000 people, traveling Europe, going to France and not being able to speak the language, and them not really being able to speak our language, but knew the language of the music and was grooving with the music. That was profound for me. And
Satori, I just wanted to say one thing. George always told me that funk is making something out of nothing. That is what it is. So thank you.
So I want to thank our panel and our guests. I'm sure that each and every one of you have a story about George Clinton in some kind of way. We found that out when he came to the Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers at the DIA in 2015. George is in everybody's story. So we want to thank you all for coming tonight. We want to thank Detroit PBS. I want to thank Marty Fishkoff for the honor of being able to moderate this panel. I want to thank each and every one of these esteemed musicians. We're still happy to be alive and doing our thing.
Again.